The Senate will come to order. Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Senators Aguilar, Baumgardner, Carroll, Cook, Crowder, Donovan, Garcia, Grantham, Guzman, Heath, Hill, Hodge, Holbert, John, Johnston, Jones, Kafalis, Kerr, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Martinez Jimenez, Merrifield, Neville, Newell, Roberts, Scheffel, Scott, Sonnenberg, Stedman, Tate, Todd, Ulibarri, Woods. Mr. President.
Here. With 35 present, 0 absent, 0 excused, we have a quorum. Colleagues and guests, would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please join me, colleagues and guests, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the journal for Friday, April 1st be dispensed with, no fooling, and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted and the journal is approved. Senate Services.
April 4, 2016, correctly printed Senate Bills 179, 180, 181, and 182, Senate Joint Resolution 27, correctly engrossed Senate Joint Resolution 26, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bills 166, 168, and 171, correctly re-revised House Bills 1005, 1060, 1088, 1109, 1106, 1323, correctly enrolled Senate Joint Memorial 1, Senate Joint Resolutions 18, 21, and 22.
Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I move that the Senate proceed out of order for purposes of consideration of Senate Memorial 1.
You've heard the motion that the Senate proceed out of order. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Memorial 1. Mr. Majors.
Senate Memorial 1 by Senator Roberts, memorializing former State Senator James Jim Isgar.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Senate Memorial 1 and ask that it be read at length.
Whereas, our respected former colleague, James Jim Isgar, a past member of the Colorado General Assembly, departed this life on March 4th, 2016, at the age of 64. And whereas Senator Isgar was born May 5th, 1951, in Durango, Colorado, to Anne Louise and Arthur Richard Isgar. And whereas in 1969, Senator Isgar graduated high school and set off for the University of Colorado to study engineering, but soon returned to help with his family farm and completed a bachelor's degree in accounting from Fort Lewis College. And whereas Senator Isgar went on to become a certified public accountant and studied taxation at Colorado State University before working for a Longmont accounting firm. And whereas in 1976, Senator Isgar was accepted to law school at the University of Denver, but did not attend because he said his parents would sell the farm if I didn't come back and take it over. And whereas Senator Isgar had an extensive background in water issues before serving as a state senator and served on a number of water boards, including the La Plata and Animas La Plata Conservancy Districts, the Southwestern Water Conservation District, and H.H. Ditchko, where he served 25 years as president. And whereas in 1988, Governor Roy Romer appointed Senator Isgar to the Colorado Board of Agriculture, and Senator Isgar was later appointed to the governing boards for his alma mater, Fort Lewis College, Colorado State University, and the University of Southern Colorado. And whereas in 2001, Senator Isgar was appointed to the state senate to fill a vacancy left by former state senator Jim Dyer, and he was reelected to 2 more terms in the state senate. And whereas during his time as senator, Senator Isgar served on the Senate Transportation, Finance, and Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy Committees, and he served on the Joint Water Resources Review Committee, Transportation Legislation Review Committee, and the Legislative Audit Committee. And whereas Senator Isgar also served on the Senate Select Committee on Homeland Security in 2005 and the Senate Select Committee on Renewable Energy in 2007. And whereas in 2009, Senator Isgar was appointed as the United States Department of Agriculture's Director of Rural Development for Colorado by President Barack Obama, and he served as director for the next 4 years. And whereas in the last few years, Senator Isgar returned to his first love of gardening, and it was not an unusual occurrence to see him at the local farmer's market selling vegetables and spending time with various people. And whereas Senator Isgar was known for his attention to detail and for his influence over state water law and policy, and he was a strong champion of education. And whereas Senator Isgar has been described as a true Coloradan and someone who was innately good, and his granddaughter Abby has said of him that it was as if he had a magnet in his chest that brought people closer to him. And whereas it is fitting that we, the members of the Senate of the 70th General Assembly, pay tribute to the dedicated service of Senator James Jim Isgar and express our deep regret and sorrow occasioned by his death. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 70th General Assembly of the State of Colorado that in the death of James Jim Isgar, the people of the State of Colorado have lost a devoted public servant and an outstanding citizen, and that we, the members of the Senate of the 70th General Assembly, pay tribute to James Isgar for his years of dedicated public service, and do hereby extend our deep and heartfelt sympathy to the members of his family. Be it further resolved that copies of this memorial be sent to Senator Isgar's wife, Brenda Isgar, his children Matt Isgar, Andy Isgar, Sarah Newton, Kate O'Brien, and Caleb Luz, and his mother, Ann Isgar.
Colleagues, please be seated. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to say a few words. I know we've got a number of folks here to speak today, but Senator Isgar, who I guess I'll just refer to as Jim because I think that's what he would say, just call him Jim, but he was an incredible, dedicated public servant, and you all know the distance from the southwest corner to be up here. There wasn't any corner of the state that Jim didn't cover. He had an incredibly big heart. He was very generous with his time and his guidance to many of us. I was in the House for 4 years while he served over here. Our difference in party affiliation didn't matter in the least. What mattered the most was where we came from and what could we work together on. So it is my honor to introduce this, and I would yield the floor to any others who might want to speak.
Senator Hodge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this memorial. When I think of Jim Isgar, I think of big. I think of the big black hat. I think of those great big cowboy boots and his great big personality. Jim Isgar was big in his own right. But I thought in his honor today, I would read what Supreme Court Justice Gregory Hobbs said when Jim received the Colorado Foundation for Water Education's President's Award in 2013. The Democrat in Jim Isgar came alive at a young age when he traveled with his father to Washington, D.C. in 1962 and met President John F. Kennedy at the White House. He attended rural elementary schools in Hesperus, followed by junior high and high school in Durango, while his mother, Ann, ran a family-owned motel there. Graduating in 1969 and setting off for the University of Colorado to study engineering, he soon returned to the farm and ranch to help as his father was recovering from his own bout of cancer. He completed his bachelor's degree in accounting at Fort Lewis in 1973, became a certified public accountant, studied taxation at Colorado State University for 4 quarters, and worked for an accounting firm in Longmont. He had been accepted to law school at the University of Denver in 1976, but his parents said they would sell the farm if I don't come back and take it over, he recalls. During the first decade of the 21st century, a period of significant innovation in water legislation, Isgar sponsored, co-sponsored, or worked on virtually every successful water bill. These included the 2003 Agricultural Water Rights Leasing Statute for in-stream flows during drought periods, as well as the 2001 Recreational In-Channel Diversion Statute, permitting water rights for kayak courses. He credits the 2005 Colorado Water for the 21st Century Act, particularly its roundtable process, with accomplishing better understanding of complicated legal and technical matters in all the river basins. Jim, rest in peace. My sympathies to the family.
Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Jim Isgar, Senator, started to say Senator, better not do that. I'll say the senator from Brighton said it very nicely. Big Jim. I worked on a lot of legislation with him my freshman year down here. I served over in the House. Jim was in the Senate. And he cared about rural Colorado. He knew that the policies had to be made for the entire state, but his heart was for rural Colorado. And me being from Northwest Colorado and representing a rural area, he said, get that young kid over there and see if he wants to help me on this legislation. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. Party didn't mean anything to him. It was what was important. It was what was in his heart and what was important to the people of the rural areas in this state. Like I said, we worked on a lot of stuff together. I remember the first time that I went out to the stock show as a legislator. It was Jim Isgar, myself, and another individual that was a lobbyist. And we were sitting there and he said, he punched me and he said, hey, you ever been here before? I said, well, I've been to the stock show, but I've never been to this auction. He said, well, son, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll let you buy this beef. I said, well, I don't know anything about doing this for the legislature. He said, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'll help you. You just keep your eye on me. I'll nudge you. And I'll tell you when to stop. And that's the way it was. That started our friendship a few days into the legislature. It was my first few days down here. And he treated you like he knew you. He either liked you or he didn't. And I don't know why he liked me, but he took a liking to me. And he was what you could say was a good friend. And we worked on a lot of stuff down here. But I never will forget, he said, you know what? You got your word down here. That's all you've got. He said, if you keep that to the people that you work with, you'll get along down here pretty good. You're not going to agree with everybody, but get along with them. Treat everybody the same. And I never will forget that. if he ever called you to his office, you were hoping that you hadn't done something wrong, because he could be a little stern. And I hear people giggling, so they evidently knew him, evidently knew him pretty good. But we didn't always agree on stuff, but he was a good guy to work with. And I just wanted to say that my condolences to the family and friends. And thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Heath.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick thought. I got to serve with Jim the first 2 years I was here, and what I will just say is what an example he set for all of us as to how we deal with each other. It's something I've tried to emulate the 6 years that I've been here without him, but what an incredible human being. I'm so glad we can honor him today.
Is there further discussion? Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, many of you know our rules allow for former state senators to address the body. That's not allowed for under our rules for former state representatives, but it's a courtesy we've extended in recent years. Therefore, Mr. President, I move that the Senate suspend its rules and recess for the purpose of allowing former state representatives and former state senators to address the body concerning Senate Memorial 1.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will suspend its rules and be in recess for the purposes of considerations of former senators and representatives. Colleagues, please come to the well. You know the way. Most of you do. President Fitzgerald.
Thank you, President Cadman. Jim Iskar was my friend in a body where you don't really make real friends. We were an odd couple, me from New York City and Jim from Hesperus, or was it Breen, one being a little too big for it to be his home. I would say that Jim bridged the gap for a caucus that was largely Front Range and took us to the Western Slope so that we understood the issues of water and conservation, things that make the Western Slope so special. Jim was an example to all of us. He will never be forgotten in our minds. Jim was the man that John Wayne hoped to be. He was big and bold and truthful and honest. You couldn't have a better friend than Jim Iskar.
Well, I know there's further discussion. Senator Keller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, body, for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about Jim Iskar. You know, the memorial that was read, there was a phrase in there that said, Jim was innately good. And that sums it up. He was innately good. When he walked into a room, he had a calming presence. It wasn't just his size, it was his spirit. It was his manner, his delivery. He respected everybody. He treated everybody equally, and you could go to him, and the one thing I remember the most about Jim Iskar is that he had that old, what do I want to say, old country, old world mannerism where if you shook hands to make an agreement, that's all it took. He stuck to his commitment, to his honor, to his name, to his word. You didn't need it in writing. You didn't need to sign anything. He had that gentleman's agreement. And I always appreciated the fact that I had the honor to serve with him and that I learned so much from him, not only about the agricultural and rural sectors of our state, but also about how to be a true public servant and to have civility at all times. In the years that he was here, not once did he make a negative comment, not once did he utter a nasty comment or word at this podium. He always had the gentlemanly persona, and I want to thank Brenda for sharing him with us and allowing us to have him here with us when we did. Colorado is better for it.
Representative Curry.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. It's a great honor to be able to speak today. I have to have full disclosure that I'm hoping to get through this without tears, so if that happens, I apologize. I spent 5 years working directly with Senator Isgar. I was a member of the House, and when I came here, he was here. He was chairing the Ag Committee, and when I got elected, our Speaker Andrew Romanoff, appointed me chair of the Ag Committee in the House, and I had actually never even attended a committee meeting, let alone chaired one. So it took a lot of training for Jim to get me whipped into shape, and he actually kept a pretty close eye on me. What he taught me was to fix only what's broken, to be respectful of the region where a particular piece of legislation came from. In the Ag Committee, we often dealt with bills that were specific to a region, and he always deferred to the members of the General Assembly that brought those bills forward, and he tried to make them better on their behalf and on the state's behalf. Senator Isgar and I, we were prime sponsors on 48 different bills over those 5 years. And, you know, some of those bills were compulsory because as a chairman, you have to carry the bills that come forward from the administration. But many of those were policy-oriented pieces of legislation. And I wanted to tell you a story about one that just shows you how much wisdom Senator Isgar had that I didn't have at the time. The bill that came forward to set up this roundtable process, this Water for the 21st Century piece of legislation, I thought was a fair amount of nonsense because it just meant more meetings, lots and lots of discussion and meetings, and I thought we should take that money and build dams or improve headgates or improve irrigation structures. And Senator Isgar said, you know, Kathleen, that's pretty short-sighted. But he ended up finding a different sponsor. One, Representative Josh Penry, ran that because I was a no vote, and look what's happened now. That's ended up being a really good piece of legislation. It's been good for our state. It brought people together. We've been able to discuss issues that we wouldn't have been able to discuss before, and that was Jim, Senator Isgar. He had vision, and he was so smart. He was always miles ahead of me, Brenda. He could take a look at a bill and say, you know, this looks good on paper, but it won't work in the real world. We need to fix this. And he did. He did. We shared our responsibilities for 5 years in terms of taking care of or I shouldn't say taking care, chairing the Water Resources Review Committee in the summer. And we made sure that the Wednesday morning briefings occurred to help the committee members in both the House and the Senate learn about issues that were before the two committees. And we made our weekly pilgrimage to the Colorado Water Congress State Affairs Committee on Monday mornings, which is always a lot of fun. If any of you guys have ever run a water bill and attended one of those State Affairs Committee meetings, it's an experience, and I know some of you guys are up there. But it made us create better law. I don't know if any of you all remember his office. I know some of you do. Yeah, the elk mount, the papers everywhere, and you'd go in there and you'd think, he hasn't even read these bills. Oh, very wrong assumption. The guy knew exactly what was going on, and what's more, he was going to make it better. I want to wrap up by saying one thing. We worked on wildlife, agriculture, mining, water, oil and gas, and then he did a lot of other good stuff too, but those were the real topics we tackled, royalty owners. But if Jim were here today, I think, and he could very well be, for those of you who know Jim, he's probably keeping an eye on me still. would want, I think, to be remembered for his commitment to agriculture, to production agriculture. He loved the land and he loved the people who worked on it. And he missed home, Brenda. He missed his ranch, he missed his farm, he missed his family. So while he was here, that was a big sacrifice. So I want to thank you again, and I miss him terribly.
Senator Brophy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and colleagues, good morning. And to the family, I want to add my thank you for your sacrifice in allowing Jim to come down and serve the state of Colorado. I'm positive that the theme this morning will be about a giant, and he was a giant of a man, something like this much taller than me, with that huge black hat and that massive heart and that incredible intellect. But he always fooled you with that incredible intellect because he never had to act like he was the smartest man in the room, even though in many cases, most cases, probably every case he was. So while we remember the giant of a man in this building where it seems like everybody has a giant ego, let's remember that Jim Isgar in one area was not a giant. He was a very humble man. And I learned a ton from that humble man. Jim Isgar, thank you for your service to the state of Colorado. May you rest in peace.
Senator Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues, former colleagues. It's an honor to be here remembering Jim Isgar. Sitting at that desk right back there where our senator from Northwest Colorado is sitting. But it was a great symbol for a person that could bring this chamber together, because it really was a place where both sides could meet, is in that seat. And I wanted to thank the family and your community for bringing and sharing Senator Isgar with all of us. I came in and serving the Western Slope where our districts abutted each other. I had 11 counties, but I had a lot to learn. And then ultimately was able to fill those big boots in the Ag Committee, but never would have been prepared for that had it not been for his generous spirit, his generous heart, to walk me through all of the issues I needed to understand before I could really deal with them in an appropriate way. So as a colleague from Western Colorado, and the inspiration he's provided so many of us, and the courage he demonstrated, but he also was so clear about what was going to be right for his constituents and what was going to be right for the state of Colorado. We so miss Jim. Again, we thank you, our condolences, and really appreciate the opportunity here to give tribute to one of the greatest members that served here.
Further discussion? Senator Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about our good friend, Senator Jim Isgar. What I want to tell you is my experience with him when he first walked into this chamber. As a freshman, he immediately understood how to work this process. He walked in with an awareness of how to deal with people. And the interesting thing is that he understood that there is a very strong connection between urban issues and between rural issues. And when legislators from rural districts and legislators from the urban districts work together, they can work wonders down in this chamber. And I remember he came to me and talked to me about a branding bill, and I thought, branding bill? I said, okay, well, he said, no, Rob, I have to explain this to you. We live this. And I thought, wow. So he took the time to explain to this urban senator why branding was so important to a rural district and to a rural legislator. And it wasn't just that. It was just that's how he operated. And I saw him as a man of ethics. And we say ethics, what does that really mean? Well, ethics means it's a way that we all have our ethics and how we operate, how we live, how we treat each other. But when we say he's a good man, what does that really mean? Well, let me give you an example. Somehow, Senator Isgar and I got on the topic of talking about ethics and whatnot, and he said to me, we were talking about integrity, and he said, Rob, what integrity really is doing the right thing when no one's looking. And that was Senator Isgar, a man of ethics and integrity. Thank you.
Senator Togtrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wow. I first met Jim right after he was appointed to fill a vacancy. We had a interim committee, was the Rural Road Show for health care, and we were down in the Durango area, and I met Jim at the time, and Senator Hagedorn was with me. He was a senator. I was still in the House, and we were doing it, and I was so impressed by his knowledge immediately of what we were doing on the interim committee around the Rural Road Show. And then I had the pleasure, after I came over here to the Senate, of serving with Jim. And I had the pleasure of also serving on his committee as when he was chair of the Ag Committee. And he was a giant when it came to rural issues. And I always listened to him very carefully because he did care about his district. Many times, Jim and I were on the wrong side of the caucus on issues, but we did work. We did know, because what we did and why we were on the wrong side of the caucus many times is because we both knew that we were representing our district, not the party, and that's why we stayed there. Last 2 years, or two of the last 4 years I was down here when I was minority leader, I had the privilege of having Bob in my office. And those of you that remember Jim, Bob was his elk, huge trophy elk that was in the office, and I was so proud of it. Of course, people would come in and ask me, was that my trophy? And I had to be honest and tell them no, unfortunately. But Jim truly was a giant of a man. He was also such a gentleman, gentle giant, and he will be missed. He has been missed down here, and his spirit lives on. And I too want to thank the family for sharing him with the state of Colorado. Well, all the service that he did to the state, not only down here, but on all the committees that he served on. And please accept my sympathy. Thank you.
Senator Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. President, and former colleagues, and to Senator Roberts for bringing this memorial forward. My condolences to Brenda and all of the Isgar family, my friends, my neighbors. I didn't serve with Jim. I served after Jim. I had that opportunity because Jim was dedicated to this chamber, to the state of Colorado, and went on to rural development. He stood for agriculture, he stood for water, he stood for Colorado. I found it a bit ironic when I took a chair here and I saw my name over on this desk. I would have never had that opportunity if it hadn't been for Jim being here first. I really didn't know if I'd be able to speak this morning, but it's important. I think Jim gave me that strength to be here, stand in the Colorado State Senate, and address this sacred chamber and talk about the importance of working together to move legislation forward that benefits the state as a whole. Jim worked on both sides of the aisle. He was a true Democrat. He probably differed with his caucus at times. He worked on this side of the aisle as well, and that was important, and I think the folks that worked with him recognize that. I think there was Kathleen Curry mentioned water bills. Water bills were near and dear. That is where I served with Jim prior to him being in the Senate and while he was in the Senate. I was with the Division of Water Resources. As a division engineer, we get calls on weekends from Jim about where's the water in my ditch? Why isn't the ditch running water? So I guess I did serve with Jim in a number of ways. But there was a couple comments about water bills that were made. I think in the water community, we always heard that a bill didn't get through the Senate Ag Committee, which he viewed as his committee, unless it had been Isgarized. And there was a number of bills, even lots of you know that, even if it had gone through the Colorado Water Congress and maybe through the other chamber, When it came to the Senate Ag Committee, lots of times those bills were Isgarized, and they were really better bills because of that. He truly understood the importance of water and the importance of forming the roundtable process that has continued that conversation in Colorado. The other comment, I don't know if it was true, I heard it as a rumor, and some of you may have been on the floor, is there was a heated debate about a bill going back and forth. And Jim came up to this podium and he said, well, if it ain't broke yet, let's fix it till it is. So good lesson for all of us. The family, Jim was a giant, and he was a true statesman. He was well known in the local community. Joan made comments, as his sister Joan, about Jim used to prepare some of the things for this chamber or committee while he was out driving his tractor in the field. And people laughed about that, but I'm sure that was true. You know, there's some time where he wanted to be by himself and collect his thoughts, and it was very beneficial time, and it's probably very beneficial time for all of us. So big loss for Colorado, big loss for Southwest Colorado and the family. So my condolences, Brenda and the Isgar family.
Is there further discussion? Former members? The Senate will come back to order. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last little story I'd like to say, this weekend I was riding a bike and I thought, oh, I should put a helmet on, and I didn't. But, you know, there's that certain way you're supposed to wear the helmet, like straight across, not tip back and not tip forward. Well, Jim was a person very comfortable in his own boots, and we'd be out in the district someplace and he'd have that black cowboy hat. And instead of doing that straight thing that people say, no, you got to have the hat just so, he'd just push his hat back on his forehead so he could rub on his forehead, and he didn't care what he looked like, but that hat was part of him, and he was very comfortable in his boots. And somebody I'm very proud to have known, proud to have followed in the line for Senate District 6, and I appreciate all the great stories. And again, my thanks to Brenda and the family for being here. And with that, Mr. President, I renew my motion for the adoption of Senate Memorial 1. And I request the use of the present roll call.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Memorial 1. A roll call has been requested, and is our custom. We shall also ring the Senate chimes. Mr. Majors.
Senators Aguilar. Aguilar, aye. Baumgartner. Baumgartner, aye. Carroll. Carroll, aye. Cook. Cook, aye. Crowder. Crowder, aye. Donovan. Donovan, aye. Garcia. Garcia, aye. Grantham. Grantham, aye. Guzman. Guzman, aye. Heath. Heath, aye. Hill. Hill, aye. Hodge. Hodge, aye. Holbert. Holbert, aye. John. John, aye. Johnston. Johnston, aye. Jones. Jones, aye. Kafalis. Kafalis, aye. Kerr. Kerr, aye. Lambert. Lambert, aye. Lundberg. Lundberg, aye. Marble. Marble, aye. Martinez-Humenick. Martinez-Humenick, aye. Merrifield. Merrifield, aye. Neville. Neville, aye. Newell. Newell, aye. Roberts.
Aye.
Roberts, aye. Sheffel. Sheffel, aye. Scott. Scott, aye. Sonnenberg. Sonnenberg, aye. Stedman. Stedman, aye. Tate. Tate, aye. Todd. Todd, aye. Ulibarri. Ulibarri, aye. Woods. Woods, aye. Senator Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald, aye. Senator Hernandez.
Aye.
Hernandez, aye. Senator Brophy. Brophy, aye. Senator Keller. Keller, aye. Senator Hagedorn. Hagedorn, aye. Senator Schwartz. Schwartz, aye. Representative Curry. Curry, aye. Senator Toktrop. Toktrop, aye. Senator Whitehead. Whitehead, aye. Mr. President.
Aye.
Mr. President, aye.
With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, 8 senators emeritus, Senate Memorial 1 is adopted. Without objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Colleagues, please help me welcome the family and thank them for being here and show our appreciation for Senator Isgar and his countless years of service to the state and to this body. The Senate will stand in recess so that we can greet our guests. The Senate will come back to order. A message from the House.
April 4, 2016, Mr. President, the House has passed on third reading transfer the advisory statute, House Bill 1396.
We're going to go out of order.
Got to move it to approves.
Message from the reviser.
April 4, 2016, we hear the transmit without comment, House Bill 1396.
General order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. To move the Senate proceed out of order for purposes of consideration of resolutions.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 25?
Senate Joint Resolution 25 by Senator Newell and Representative Singer concerning the designation of April 2016 as Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Senator Newell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Joint Resolution 25 and ask for it to be read at length until line 33.
Whereas, children are key to Colorado's future success, prosperity, and quality of life. While children are our most precious resource, they are also our most vulnerable. And whereas child abuse and neglect is a serious and reprehensible problem in our society. And whereas in 2014, there were nearly 10,000 confirmed cases of child abuse and neglect in Colorado, and 20 children died as a result. In the United States, there were over 700,000 confirmed cases of child abuse and neglect, and 1,580 children died as a result. And whereas groundbreaking studies like the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study have revealed the significant increased long-term health and mental health risks to children exposed to traumatic adverse experiences, including heart disease, chronic lung disease, liver disease, and suicide. And whereas this research shows that the impacts of child abuse and neglect on our children and our society are even greater than we previously thought, and that we must begin a new dialogue and evolve how we think and talk about child abuse and neglect. And whereas preventing and treating child abuse and neglect must be a high priority in our communities, our state, and the nation at large, children have a right to be safe and to have the opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow. And whereas we as a community must come together to extend a helping hand to children and families in need so that their voices are heard by all. And whereas by providing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can ensure that Colorado children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders, helping to secure the future of this state and nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 70th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, proclaim April 2016 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the state of Colorado, that we encourage every person to perform a positive act each day on behalf of children, and that we call upon all citizens, community, and faith-based organizations, businesses, and government agencies to create alliances to increase their efforts to strengthen Colorado families and to prevent child abuse and neglect, thereby strengthening the communities of this state.
Colleagues, please be seated. Senator Newell.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my privilege to move Senate Joint Resolution 25.
Continue.
Thank you. On Friday, members, more than 100 child advocates, child welfare experts, parents, and kids came out to the Capitol to launch April as National Child Abuse Prevention Month. This began a launch of a statewide community outreach effort to educate communities on child abuse prevention. Here in the legislature over the last few years, we have together collaborated on significant legislation that has positively affected children from across the state. Establishment of the first statewide child welfare training academy for caseworkers and supervisors, creation of the Office of the Child Protection Ombudsman, a statewide hotline for reporting suspicions of child abuse and neglect, and improving our child fatality review processes, tightening up the background checks of foster care parents, and removing school discipline policies that negatively affected kids in foster care. The list goes on, and we have been so grateful for the collaboration here under the dome and in our communities. Here with us today in the chamber, you can see across this whole line against the wall are these celebrities of child abuse prevention. Although I cannot introduce all of them because there are too many, what I can say is that we have members from the Kemp Foundation, we have members from the child welfare system within the State Department, we have the Child Advocates for Children for the CASAs, we have the current and a former Child Protection Ombudsman and staff representative of Office of Child's Representative, and Rocky Mountain Children's Law Center. The list goes on and on. However, we have talked just so far about the solutions that are responsive rather than preventive. So today, we're talking about starting this month out about being proactive and preventive. There are more than a million children in Colorado. That's a lot of little kiddos running around like jumping beans, full of giggles and joy, with dreams of what they want to be when they grow up. All those children deserve to be in nurturing homes, supportive schools, and safe neighborhoods. As we know, it takes a village to provide that, and each of us plays a role in that mission. As a Colorado community, we all know that we need to work together to protect our most precious resources, the future leaders of our state. We can do that by helping parents to learn more about parenting and child development, know when they need to give a hug to a child, or even put themselves in timeout. Understand that conflict is inevitable, but that violence is not. And to role model peaceful resolution of conflict and to be resilient in the face of stress. Nurture friendships and support systems for themselves and their children, and ask support when they need it. Help the children manage their feelings and relationships. And another way to help prevent child abuse and neglect is to call our toll-free hotline number if you have concerns regarding the safety or well-being of a child. You can call 1-844-CO-4-KIDS. Each year, over 60,000 babies are born in Colorado. We can make a pledge to each of those children to grow and develop into happy and healthy adults. When we invest in them, we are investing in community and economic development as flourishing children become the foundation of a prosperous and innovative society. Maybe we as legislators could have a local expert come in to talk at a town hall. Maybe we could put up links to our local resources on our websites. And by paying a closer attention throughout the month of April to honor those who have or have been, who maybe are struggling at home or in the foster care system, or to honor those who never made it to adulthood due to abuse or neglect. Throughout the month of April, city buildings will be turned blue, blue ribbons will be worn, and pinwheel gardens will be planted all over Colorado to help awareness for this cause. Thank you for standing up today for the children, for taking a stand and making a commitment to be part of that village that watches out for each other, helps each other as neighbors in nurturing those little jumping beans into responsible, healthy young adults. After all, we are all in this together. Thank you.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of this resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 25. Express my appreciation to the previous senator who has been a real champion of these issues related to child welfare and child protection. A couple of points that I wish to add. One is that, in the years that I've been in the legislature, I've come to learn some things about child welfare, child protection, and how complex it is. And I think one of the things that we're we're confronted with is the idea of how do you strike the balance between ensuring that when there's a concern about the safety of the child, that indeed that child is protected and kept safe, and balancing that with the need to keep families whole. And as I've met with child protection workers and other folks, I've come to understand a little bit better how that is not an easy thing to discern. I also think that on a very positive note is that I have found that these issues around child welfare, child protection, tend to be, not 100%, but I think most of the time, tend to be bipartisan issues. These are examples where we can come together and we can identify things that make sense, the proper role of state government. I think in closing, it is a core responsibility of the public sector, of government, to make sure that children are safe and protected, and that we are doing our best to prevent child abuse and neglect, and to make available different pathways to address these issues. And so when we look at things like differential response, for example, where we've created a pathway that is not necessarily going down the track of investigating things. It's a pathway that says, well, maybe there are some resources or some issues that this family is dealing with, and the risk is of a low to moderate level, and therefore there might be a different approach rather than trying to take the child out of the family of origin. So I commend this body for when we come together to work on these issues. I commend the partnerships that are essential with the private sector and certainly with the community-based organizations, certainly the Kemp Center, the Rocky Mountain Children's Law Center, and the list goes on, and of course the Office of the Child Representative. So thank you, colleagues, for listening. This is very important, and I'm glad we're giving it some attention.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of this really important resolution. It's always interesting each year. In the 12 years I've been down here, I think we've paused and we get our little blue ribbons and we talk and we recognize how important this is. But I think what the role is for us is when we leave this place, when we go out into their communities and we see and we witness families that are distressed, be it at the grocery store, the mom having a crying baby, trying to keep that child from grabbing food off of the shelf, or another issue and the mom is frantic, to just reach out and be kind, to reach out and say, boy, I can remember that when I had my kids, and to break that momentum that is building of the stress that a family is feeling, maybe a mom, maybe a dad, that children do misbehave in public sometimes. I know my boys never did, but but helping recognize and bring support to people who are trying to raise their children, and there's such a challenge before them today, more so than I think ever before, and to just kind of diffuse the situation, and that's something that each and every one of us can do. It doesn't take a bill to pass, it doesn't have to be a law, but it is about kindness. It's about stepping out and recognizing, and not just being irritated by a crying child at a restaurant or in a grocery store or wherever, but to reach out and help and give that support. So I rise in support for this important resolution. And I think it starts with so many issues with how we bring our children and grandchildren up, and talking about how you treat one another and what's okay and what's not. That's where bully-proofing comes in, all of those different elements, but helping know and understand that when you are out of control as a parent, as a grandparent, step away, put that child in a safe place, and let someone else help you and intervene. That's something that each and every one of us can do for the safety of the children in our world. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 25. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 25 is adopted. Co-sponsors, Senator Newell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for the use of the current roll call.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1011?
House Joint Resolution 1011 by Representatives Nordberg and Radin and Senators John and Holbert concerning the reappointment of Diane E. Ray to the position of State Auditor.
Senator John.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I move HJR 161011, but I don't ask for it to be read at length.
Is there further discussion? Senator John.
Members, it has come to that time of year in the legislative body where we have to look at the appointment of the state auditor. As you know, by our Constitution, it is up to the majority of both houses to appoint an auditor after a term of 5 years. It was unanimous coming out of the audit committee. It was 2011 that Diane Ray was nominated and accepted as the state auditor. She has been phenomenal. And our committee voted unanimously that she should have a second term, and so that she be reappointed. And I know that we're tight on time, but I have to tell you the incredible work that we are so proud in the state of Colorado, and we are very fortunate to have someone of her credibility. She was actually named one of 3 women to watch in 2012 in the Experienced Leader category by Colorado Society of Certified Public Accountants. In May of 2015, she was awarded the 2015 Leo Reithmeyer Award as the top public administrator in the state by the School of Public Affairs of the University of Colorado, Denver. And she is presently serving as the president of the National State Auditors Association for the term of 2015-16 term. She has been phenomenal at the job that she has done for the state of Colorado, and I am amazed every time we go to committee at the knowledge that she has on all of the issues that the state seems to cover. So with that, I would ask for your support of HJR 1011.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I joined my colleague, fellow member of the Audit Committee, in asking for your support of HJR 1011. Diane Ray, our auditor, serves with a very even hand. Sometimes people will come to the Audit Committee with a political objective, and because of the balanced representation between the House and the Senate and both sides of the aisle, the Audit Committee has not been used as such. And I fully support the reappointment of Diane Ray for another 5-year term. She has managed her office very, very well and helped guide the former chair and the current chair, I think, to the best possible outcomes whenever that question of maybe a political motivation might come up. This is a very important job, task, position in our state government, and I encourage you, if you have not served on the Audit Committee, to maybe visit the state auditor's website, take a look at the vast amount of work that has been done, is currently underway, and will continue, I hope, under the leadership of Diane Ray. Ask for your support.
Senator Neville. Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of the reappointment of Auditor Ray. It's not often that you can say that you really enjoy the work of a committee, because frankly, many of the committees were focused on arguing for, against, whatever it might be. But when it comes to the auditor, the audit committee, I can tell you that it's an extremely enjoyable committee, even if we do get into things that we don't want to really see and have to look at. But this is the area that we have an opportunity to truly identify the weaknesses and also identify some of the strengths that we see too. It's such an important area. I encourage everybody to stop by sometime, usually in the early morning hours when we do meet, and make sure that if you have a chance to serve on audit, I would highly recommend that you take up on that opportunity when it comes. But Auditor Ray does a phenomenal job. It was mentioned that she's one of the women to watch. She's just darn good at her job, and I think that's the highest compliment we can all give her. So I definitely rise in support of her reappointment.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of this resolution. You know, when an auditor shows up, I think we experience the two biggest lies in government. First lie is, we're here to help. Second lie is, we're glad to see you. But in fact, it's an essential part of our government. And as former chair, now vice chair of the Joint Budget Committee, we have had just invaluable information being inserted into our budgeting process because of the audits that have been done under the leadership of Diana Ray. And you know, this helps us start, especially when we look at the SMART Act and things like this. I just don't think we could do any better with the audit reports that we have. It really points out some major disconnects in government that sometimes we can solve with budgetary action, sometimes not. But it certainly, especially when we're here for a couple of months prior to the start of legislative session, when we get a comprehensive review of audits from the state auditor, are able to discuss those, get it onto our budget agenda for hearings by the time we start the session in January. Quite often those things are either resolved or we have a chance to resolve them during the session. So I think Auditor Ray has done a fantastic job, and I'd ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1011. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Joint Resolution 1011 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Senator John.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that the morning roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Is there objection? Seeing none, the morning roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Introduction of resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 28 by Senator Lambert to Representative Carver concerning the recognition of the 32nd Space Symposium and celebrating the premier international space policy and program forum.
Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, I move that the Senate continue to proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 28.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will proceed out of order for the consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 28. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title of Senate Joint Resolution 28?
Senate Joint Resolution 28 by Senator Lambert to Representative Carver concerning the recognition of the 32nd Space Symposium and celebrating the premier international space policy and program forum.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Joint Resolution 16-028, and I ask that it be read at length.
Whereas the Space Foundation is a global nonprofit leader in space awareness activities, educational programs, and major industry events. And whereas the Space Foundation was founded in 1983 with a mission to advance space-related endeavors to inspire, enable, and propel humanity. And whereas Colorado is home to multiple space-oriented commands, including the United States Air Force Space Command, the United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and the United States Northern Command. And whereas Colorado supports the second largest space economy in the nation, with more than 400 space-related companies developing products and systems for commercial, civil, and military space activities. And whereas Colorado space companies and research institutions are leading some of the world's most notable and innovative missions and programs in human spaceflight, deep space exploration, and earth science. And whereas the Space Foundation's Space Symposium, held at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, annually brings together civil, commercial, and national security space leaders from around the world to discuss, address, and plan for the future of space. And whereas the inaugural Space Symposium in 1984 was attended by approximately 250 space enthusiasts, and participant numbers in recent years have surpassed 11,000. And whereas the annual Space Symposium results in approximately $30 million in economic impact to the local economy, and whereas the Space Symposium has become widely known as the premier space policy and program forum in the world. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate of the 70th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, recognize April 11th as the opening day of the 32nd Space Symposium and its position as the premier international space policy and program forum. That we recognize the important contributions of the space industry to the economy of our state and the welfare of our citizens, and that we welcome the attendees from all sectors of the space community and from all parts of the world to our beautiful state. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Governor John Hickenlooper, Mr. Elliot Polhem, Chief Executive Officer of the Space Foundation, General John E. Hyten, Commander of the Air Force Space Command, Lieutenant General David L. Mann, Commander of the United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, and each member of Colorado's congressional delegation.
Colleagues, please be seated. Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, this resolution was not in your folders this morning. It should be on your desk. I believe all copies were distributed to everybody. And I just want to apologize that we had to move this fairly quickly because of this week's schedule in order to get this out and passed through the Senate and the House by April 11th when the Space Symposium begins. You might notice that this is really a big deal for the space community. It is I think the largest and certainly the most respected space and policy forum in the world. We have thousands of people coming from all over the United States, all over the world to this forum in Colorado Springs. And I'd ask for an aye vote just to support one of the major activities in space that we have in our state.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 28. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 28 is adopted. Co-sponsors, Senator Lambert.
Thank you. I would request the use of the current roll call.
Is there objection? Seeing none, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. General order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of General Order, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of General Order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Woods will take the chair.
Majority Leader Shuffle. No, sorry.
Committee will come to order.
Committee will come to order. The court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to all of the bills listed on the consent calendar?
House Bill 1153 by Representative Mellon and Senator Cook concerning the annual date by which the General Assembly receives a report regarding outcomes of decisions made by the State Board of Parole. House Bill 1035 by Representative Leonard and Senator Scott concerning the scope of statutes making the issuance of securities by public utility conditional on approval by the Colorado Public Utilities Commission in connection with clarifying that the approval requirement applies only to electric and gas utilities.
Majority Leader Shuffle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee adopt the two bills listed on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1153 and House Bill 1035.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills listed on the general orders consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Majority Leader Shuffle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had 2 bills under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
April 4, 2016, Mr. President, the committee holds basic reports that in consideration of the following tax bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1153 and House Bill 1035 pass on second reading in order to revise, placed on the counter for third reading and final passage.
Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. House Bill 1153, House Bill 1035 passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the general orders second reading of bills calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of general orders second reading of bills. Senator Woods will take the chair.
Committee will come to order. The Coat rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 147?
Senate Bill 147 by Senators Newell, Martinez, Minnick, and Representative Pedersen concerning establishing the Colorado Zero Suicide Model to reduce death by suicide in the Colorado healthcare system.
Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We move Senate Bill 147 and the Health and Human Services Committee report.
To the Health and Human Services Committee report, Senator Martinez-Huminik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee report, there was a strike below put on by Senator Lundberg, which expands the bill from zero suicide in the healthcare systems to a broader, comprehensive plan for reducing suicides in Colorado. The criminal justice system and faith-based organizations were added to scope of the bill, and it adds creation of a training plan for civil commitment, 72-hour holds, and for HIPAA. The date of implementation was removed. Also was deleted the Suicide Prevention Commission recommendation that the Colorado healthcare systems adopt the zero suicide model, removes public and private insurers and hospital chaplains, inserts suicidal tendencies, and the collection and coordination of already existing data has been removed.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Senator Martinez-Huminik.
We would ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Health and Human Services Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L010?
Amendment L010, Senate Bill 147 by Senator Aguilar.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank Senator Lundberg and Senator Martinez-Huminik for their work on this bill and helping us get to a point where we could move this forward. I think that...
Senator Aguilar, please don't refer to members by name.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Sorry, sorry, members. I think that the results will move us forward in the direction we want in dealing with suicide in our state. I did, though, want to bring forward this amendment, and I move Amendment L010. And members, what this amendment would do is put back in the data collection. Data collection is a core component of the model that fully recognizes the importance of privacy laws. Data collection reported only de-identified publicly is integral to measuring the program's impact. We do not currently have the authority to require access to system data, and this bill does not change CDPHE's data collection authority. So it's data that's already existing, and this would allow us to see what the effect of this model is on preventing suicides in our state, and I'd respectfully ask for your support.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I respectfully ask for a no vote on this, recognizing that information is very important, and it cuts both ways. And the reason we had taken this out of the original bill is to try to find, strike that balance between how much information are you collecting and what are the other elements vitally necessary for prevention of suicide. This is really a balancing situation where we're trying to recognize that you need to coordinate various agencies and groups and understand the point of the bill is to create a plan for Colorado to address suicide prevention, but to balance that with the privacy issues and concerns. And there's a great deal of concern today on how appropriate it is to gather all the facts from everywhere into one comprehensive coordinated system. And in order to find the common ground rather than put a point of contention into this legislation, we took this measure out. And I believe that is the correct step and would urge a no vote on this amendment, with all respect to understanding that information is important, but information is needs to be balanced as well. And the way this is worded is it's just pulling it all into one place at one time. And I'm sorry that we need to be extremely cautious when the government starts to collect all of the data and put it all in one place at one time.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would respectfully ask for a no vote on this. We actually took this out in the committee report, and so I do believe that it needs to stay the way it was in the committee report. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this basically does put the data back in that was removed from the committee report. And I personally would be an aye vote, but I know that others in this chamber are not. And it basically helps with the measuring of the different areas of the model. But we will see what the will of the body is.
Any further discussion on this amendment? The motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L010. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. To the bill, Senator Newell. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L013?
Amendment L013 to Senate Bill 147 by Senators Newell and Martinez-Humenick, amend the Health and Human Services Committee report dated March 24, 2016, page 2, after line 28, insert paren E. The Suicide Prevention
Senator Newell.
Commission has...
Thank you, Madam Chair. We move a floor amendment 013 and ask for an aye vote, and I can explain what it does.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this amendment changes the title and the term throughout to Colorado Suicide Prevention Plan. So in the committee report, it was changed to Colorado Suicide Prevention Model. And basically, what we're doing now is that we will have a Colorado Suicide Prevention Plan with models underneath that, such as the zero suicide model that was initially talked about. So the concept of the bill is broadened and as a statewide plan. It also adds related faith-based practitioners and emergency medical professionals and responders. It brings back the public and private insurers and hospital chaplains. And then it brings back the recommendation of the Suicide Prevention Commission, which was to adopt the zero suicide model. And then the term of suicidal tendencies is an inaccurate term, so we're putting in the accurate term, which is suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So remember that as you're talking with people about suicide, that no one has suicidal tendencies. You might exhibit suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and then it brings back the date of implementation as July of 2019, and we ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, the sponsor gave a very succinct description of all of this. This is part of that finding that common ground for everyone, and I certainly do encourage the adoption of this amendment and the further adoption of the bill.
Any further discussion on Amendment L013? The motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L013. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. To the bill. Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Suicide prevention in Colorado is at the top of the list when it comes to the public health plan in the statewide plan. And it is because it is a complex public health problem in Colorado, which demands a systemic solution. By implementing models such as zero suicide and systems across the state, it is hoped that most of the services that touch the lives of those at risk will be improved. In testimony, we heard about the model in particular of zero suicide, which has had up to 80% reductions in suicide noted in some of the healthcare systems. In others, one of them that we noted was 71% reduction of suicides. So we are at an unfortunate place in Colorado, where we are the 7th highest in the country in suicide, and it is that is only those who are counted. It's not those that we don't know about. And more than a couple of the problems, actually 3 of the major problems that we have found in the last couple of years, is that more than 30% of persons who die of suicide are receiving mental health care at the time of death. 45% see their primary care provider within a month of death, and 25% go to the emergency department in the month before death. Problem with that is that those people are not trained specifically in suicide risk assessment, suicide management, or treatment. And that is a gaping hole in our system in Colorado.
Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, in 2014, there were more than twice as many suicides than motor vehicle fatalities. Suicide is the second cause of death for our youth, ages 10 through 24 years old. The largest number of suicide occurs in men of working age, and certain groups are known to be at risk, high risk even, which include our veterans, active duty military, and our first responders. Rural and frontier counties have higher rates of suicide than urban counties. It is estimated that for each suicide death, there are about 25 attempts that most often show up in the healthcare system. Although significantly more men than women die by suicide, women actually make the most attempts. Each suicide death in Colorado costs about $1,104,000, including work loss. More than $1 billion for all suicide deaths in 2013. And most likely, suicide has touched someone, everyone in this room, at some point in time.
Senator Koufalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of Senate Bill 147, and I appreciate the collaborative and bipartisan spirit about trying to find some common ground on this issue. I just wanted to highlight that in my community, in Fort Collins, and in Larimer County, which I share with the good senator from Berthoud, suicide is an issue that is very stark, to say the least. And let me just share a couple of quick numbers that are relevant to Larimer County. In 2015, there were 81 suicides in Larimer County. In 2014, statewide in Colorado, and it was mentioned that we ranked 7th in the country, but in 2014, there were 1,058 suicides in the entire state. The average age of those in Larimer County who died by suicide was approximately 46 years old. 77% of those who died by suicide in Larimer County were men. Approximately 25 is the number of suicides per 100,000 Larimer County residents. Approximately 20 is the number of suicides per 100,000 Colorado residents in 2014. One thing that I want to point out also, that last year we had 4 suicides in Larimer County of children under 18, and in the span of a few weeks we had 2 middle schoolers take their lives in my community in Fort Collins. Finally, I wish to say that one way that this issue has been brought to me, I mean, I think we've all experienced people in our lives who have taken their own life for a variety of reasons, but I know that one of my constituents who testified in the committee hearing about a year ago, she lost her 39-year-old son, and one of her concerns was that people are not, the mental health professionals and social workers could use the best training, state-of-the-art training, to make sure that they are able to deal with complex issues that people face. And I think one of the benefits of this bill is it's really focusing on how we can update our pipelines and our training systems so that indeed people are qualified to deal with complex issues, which are often the case when one is thinking about and acting upon suicide. So I rise in support and I give thanks for the effort to bring this bill together and to move it forward. Respectfully ask for your support as well. Thank you.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I rise in support of Senate Bill 147. I have a quick story to read. Steve was a 13-year-old attending middle school in Sterling. He was an avid hunter and enjoyed playing the violin and the guitar. His suicide was deeply felt by his classmates, and it sent ripples through the entire school body of 400 students. Ironically, his school had denied the need for suicide prevention training for students and staff. Steve ended his life in a local town park near a large tree, which became a memorial site for student gatherings. Eventually, the city removed the tree because it had become a continuing reminder of Steve's suicide. After Steve's death, suicide prevention trainings and therapeutic services were provided to the student body, but of course, these were too late to help Steve. If he had been assessed for suicide and those around him had been educated about the warning signs of suicide, his death might have been prevented. And perhaps now he would be enjoying high school and the new freedom of having a driver's license. On behalf of educators, teachers, counselors, the administrators that work with our young people every day, I can tell you from personal experience that going to one funeral for a suicide of a former student or former student is too many. That's why I so wholeheartedly support this bill and the ultimate goal of zero suicides, because this is a case where even one is too many. Thank you.
Senator Heath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be remiss this morning if I did not take this opportunity to speak on behalf of this bill, particularly as it applies to two of my wonderful constituents, Susan and Bill Marine, who have grown to be great friends of mine. Susan particularly has just been tireless in her efforts to dealing with this issue of suicide prevention. I'm going to read the story of their family, and you will understand after I read it as to why they are so involved and why we and them feel so strongly about this bill. And let me also say thanks to the bipartisan spirit in which this bill has been presented to us. Clearly, suicide prevention is not a partisan issue, and I am glad we were able to strike this balance. And here is the story. Kevin was a 34-year-old attorney, and the assistant DA in Thornton. His dream was to become a judge. He was engaged to be married at the time of his death. While he had struggled with a bipolar condition since college, he was under the care of a psychiatrist and regularly took his prescribed medication. He was hospitalized for 3 days for depression and then discharged. Within a day of his discharge, he ended his own life. If the hospital had had the zero suicide model in place, Kevin would have been more carefully assessed for risk before being discharged. In addition, more attention would have been given to the critical transition from hospital to home. The risk of dying from suicide is many times greater in the period after discharge from a hospital. Kevin's suicide was obviously traumatic for his whole family, his friends, and his co-workers. But his suicide was especially traumatic for his little sister. She completed suicide 4 years later, using exactly the same means as her big brother. This story is just an example of why this bill is so critical and why all of us need to spend special and give special attention to this whole subject of suicide prevention. I thank the sponsors for bringing this bill.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also rise in support of this resolution. I'd like to tell you a story about a suicide that just happened recently in my district. Here about a week ago or so, we had that snow day on a Wednesday, and as a lot of you are aware that some of us come up here and we cannot leave, so I was in my office on that fateful day. I got a call from a school teacher down in southeastern Colorado. Said, you know, in his unprofessional opinion, he had way too many students in his school that were suicidal. And we all get these calls about this kind of stuff, but I quizzed him extensively, and I was fairly confident by the time I got done questioning him that he was being accurate in what he was saying. So what I did, shortly after that on the same snowy Wednesday, I went out and I contacted HHS and I contacted Department of Education, and that week was spring break at this school. So the plan was to converge on that school the next following Monday, and get kind of uplift mental health and do what they could to somewhat negate the higher number of what he was indicating was just 20 out of 70 that, in his unprofessional opinion, were suicidal. And so I did take action on it, and we did get things in place for the following Monday. So the next night, Thursday night, I got an email from the same individual that he says, unfortunately, I need to report that, I was somewhat accurate because one of the 10th graders took a 12-gauge shotgun to himself and blew his head off. And needless to say, this was a rough week. This is one of the roughest weeks I've ever had in the legislation. Because, I did what I could to get things in place, but the reality was this young man, although suicidal, went out and smoked marijuana. And that's what they attributed a lot of this to. So I think it's important that we realize that we're in a new era with the marijuana in the state of Colorado. That's why I feel it's extremely important that CSU and Pueblo has taken on the issue of testing to see what kind of potency levels and whatnot that we have and what we're dealing with. But I think it's a new world. The thing about it, it's not just suicide per se anymore. It's suicide with the drugs we have in the state of Colorado. It is on the epidemic proportion. And I'm working with rural areas right now. And the reason it's more predominant in the rural areas is because of our cost of living is so much less. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set up some task force and study this. And I've met with stakeholders throughout the area. And everybody, and I'm talking 3 areas that I've met with, everybody has an idea, but we need to pull it together to see what we can do. But I do think we can make an impact on this. But we have to realize that it's not just suicide anymore, it's suicide and drugs to the point where we don't understand the potency of them, and therefore it's somewhat changing the level of things. But, I am supportive of this very much so, but, that's why I fight so hard to get that mental health and other health care issues in rural Colorado, because I think it's vitally important to us. But thank you for listening.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I rise in support of Senate Bill 147. I have a short story to share with you from a young man named Cole Hancock, who is both on the Colorado Youth Advisory Council member and also a commissioner on the Colorado Suicide Prevention Commission. He's a junior at Heritage High School in Littleton. And when I was reading this, I couldn't help but think back to many years ago when I was teaching and my husband was coaching, and a particular incident that happened with one of my husband's former football players at Cherry Creek High School. And he got a call from one of the other players, and they were just distraught beyond words. They could barely speak. And they said, this young man had taken his life. And they said, we had all these signs and all these warnings, but we didn't think he would really do it. And they spent many, many hours together working through the guilt that they felt for not responding and trying to prevent that from happening. And this young man tells a similar story. Being in high school today means that suicide is always a lingering issue. Always a lingering issue. That's what our children, our high school children, middle school children are thinking about, because it has permeated so much. His first week at high school, at Heritage High School, he said, I remember coming into a class where the teacher was crying as she told us the news that one of her students had committed suicide. The mood of the school had changed entirely in a matter of minutes, and I remember the hallways being absolutely silent. And it was then I realized how one choice by one person can affect such a large number of people in the community around them. Sadly, I'm not the only high schooler to experience this suicide. It's the second leading cause of death in youth ages 10 to 24. And it's not unheard of to have high schools where 2 or 3 students commit suicide each year. It's almost a permission that when it happens, that it can happen again. I personally believe that preventing suicide needs to be worked on by a whole community, not just a single organization. For this reason, the Colorado Youth Advisory Council who our senator from Durango is such a strong leader for, supports Senate Bill 147 to establish the Colorado Zero Suicide Model, as we believe it will promote teamwork amongst different health agencies and organizations to reduce the number of suicides for not just teens, but all Coloradans. That was his letter. Those were his words. And I would be remiss if I did not remember three of my former students, J.T. Fielder, Drew Grant, and Christopher Payne, who chose to take their lives as young men with full potential, incredibly intelligent, incredibly creative, but couldn't deal with life. And they chose to end their life. Their families are still healing. Their friends are still feeling the pain. But we never forget. And that's why it's so very important that we pass this bill and that we continue to educate and help people know and understand that there are others out there to help them and that mental health services need never be shortchanged. Thank you.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few years ago, I had a constituent come up to me and ask me about potentially carrying a bill about suicide prevention. And when she told me this story, I couldn't help but think back to my friend in high school who went off to CSU. He was a year ahead of me. And I learned one day that he'd killed himself. His best friend had killed himself previously. And I also remembered another friend. This guy was larger than life, a firefighter. He was a Type 1 incident commander. He worked his way up the chain of command. He was at Ground Zero for a while, helping run that operation. And he committed suicide, shot himself in the head. And I can remember being so angry at him because he and I had daughters the same age. They were both about 16. And how could somebody do that to their kids? So when this constituent asked me about this bill, I had to say yes. And it was about a young man, a 16-year-old, a guy named Jesse, who took an overdose of Advil. And then he walked to the emergency room, and he was told that wasn't really a suicide attempt, but a gesture. They suggested that they follow up with a psychologist and a counselor, which they did, but no one ever told them that this kind of gesture meant Jesse was a much higher risk of suicide in the future. Because of that, I ran a bill with the senator from Littleton that moved hospitals towards telling people where resources are and what to watch out for after somebody tries to commit suicide. They wrote an email, the same family. Can you imagine going around with this in the back of your mind all the time about your child? But they said, when I heard about the Zero Suicide Initiative piloted by the Henrietta Ford Depression Center, I thought, zero suicide? That is impossible. But how many suicides are okay? It is your family. Is even one okay? We need to aim high in our efforts to prevent suicide. Members, we need to keep working on this issue. I'm proud to cast my vote yes on it. I think we need to do a lot more, and I thank the sponsors for bringing this bill and working on this terribly important issue.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I, as you know, serve on the board of Denver Health, and last fall I had a constituent reach out to me to let me know about the death by suicide of his wife, who had worked as a paramedic at Denver Health for 25 years. Her suicide had shocked the entire community of EMS workers. Her death was attributed to the stress of the job, the accumulation of trauma she faced day after day when she was first on the scene of some kind of tragedy. Ironically, she had been the chair of a committee charged with addressing the problem of suicide in their workforce. She always took care of those who worked for her, but she failed to ask for help herself. The industry itself has taken some action to try and address the high risk associated with being a first responder, and there are some online trainings available. However, much more is needed. The woman's mother said that this woman had many plans for the future, something you don't expect again of a person who dies by suicide. If Denver Health had the zero suicide model in place, the woman might have been screened and her high risk status could have resulted in appropriate treatment before she took her own life. And with that, I ask for your support of Senate Bill 147.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of SB 147 and want to thank the sponsors for their hard work. Across my district, communities are impacted by suicide, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find a town in Senate District 5 that hasn't had to struggle to find the answers because they lost someone to suicide. Personally, I lost a best friend my sophomore year in high school. She took a bottle of pain pills and walked out into the woods. A high school auditorium should not host a memorial service for a student, but that year it did. Sophomores shouldn't be ushers at their friend's memorial service, but that year I was. A math teacher took her life the following year. In college, a friend's parent took their own life, and this pattern continued. Even in a place fondly called Happy Valley, we face suicide all too often. Suicide prevention is an important discussion, an incredibly worthy goal to support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Senator Johnston.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to the two sponsors. I know this has been a long conversation. I just think about the powerful words that Senator Todd spoke, and if I go back through my own life as a teacher and as a principal, I had 674 students as a school principal, and I have lost students to drug overdoses, I have lost students to drunk driving, I've lost students to homicide, all things that we spend very serious amounts of time down here working on helping, supporting, improving. I have lost more students to suicide than to any of those causes, than to any of them. And I think if we all look back through our own family and friends and think about all the tragedies that befall people, all of the bad decisions they make, or the things that we try to take leverage on here, as a school principal, there is no place where probably I missed more chances than this one. And just last week, I lost another one. And so I thought on behalf of Mikey Etchells, who all of his classmates and friends are this week wondering what they could have done better over the last 5 or 10 years to make sure they were there for him in the times when he needed them the most. This is one very important step we can take to say the one thing we're doing to lose the most kids of all ought to be the one that we spend the most time on stopping. And so thank you to the sponsors for bringing this, and I am proud on behalf of Mikey Etchells and Josh Gray and many, many more to be an aye vote.
Minority Leader Guzman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the first day of our opening session, or the opening day of our session, I presented to the Chamber our agenda. And a big part of that agenda was suicide and suicide prevention. We lifted it up then, and we lift it up now. So many reasons for suicide. Sometimes we never know. It's almost as if, after someone's died, like this weekend I was at a funeral and somebody said to me, "You're a minister. do you believe in the afterlife? Do you think it really happens? And I said, well, you know, that's up to our own faith. Unfortunately, we have no one who's done it to tell us whether it's really real or not, whether there is life after death. Suicide is like that. We don't know exactly sometimes why someone takes their life. Sometimes there's a note, and sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there's still just the question, and sometimes there's the lingering guilt that parents may have, that friends may have, that teachers may have, that they didn't do this or they didn't do that. We just don't always know. What we know is the data, that so many folks leave us before it's what we would think is their time. There are so many people who take their life because they don't feel accepted, especially gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered children. They don't feel like there's a place for them, and so many have taken their own life to go to a better place, I suppose. But there are others who are straight. There are people who are old, there are people who are young, who decide that this is what they need to do. My dentist of many years took his life. And it wasn't until he did that that I realized that more dentists take their lives in almost any profession. Because people don't like to go to dentists, that's what I'm told. People don't like dentists. I'm not sure what the real reason is. I guess I want to take just a moment here to tell you my own story. I have had classmates who took their own lives, but right now I just want to tell you a little bit of my own story. There have been 3 times in my life where I thought of taking my life, and one was just 12 months ago. And I know that you might find that unbelievable, just as we always find when someone's taken their life. It's unbelievable. They're in good shape. They have everything to live for. Why would they do that? Sometimes it's a matter of mental illness. It's a matter of long-term emotional disability or inability to live life as we know it and as we should. Each time that I thought about that, it indeed probably was my faith that kept me here on earth. I'm proud of that, proud of my faith, proud of the reason I'm proud that I am here. I'm not here to bring attention to myself. I'm just here to give you my own story and to tell you that we never know the person sitting next to us. It could be a parent, it could be our best friend, it could be our colleague. We don't always know what someone's going through. But throughout decades, and as I've studied, one of my joys is to read political history. And the number of people that have been great leaders who've had serious bouts of depression. Abraham Lincoln was one. Gandhi was another. Martin Luther King, I'm told, had bouts. All kinds of reasons why people get to these places. But this is why it's so important that we as a state legislature embrace the reality of the numbers of people who are taking their lives. Not to save my life, because I think I do in many ways have the resources I need. But we need the resources out there for those who may not have those resources. We need to take every opportunity we can, whether it's to educate a teacher, to educate more fully a counselor, to educate friends in terms of understanding symptoms and so forth and so on. Any chance we can, we should put money into opportunities to know more about emotional and mental illness. This is why our agenda, our Senate Democrats' agenda, holds in high esteem the issue of suicide prevention. I was on Roy Romer's, Governor Romer's commission years ago to study this. And every year, almost every decade, we come back to this understanding that, we need to do something. And so finally, I hope that we will surely support this, and I thank the sponsors. I also thank the senator from Loveland. Berthoud, I thought it was Berthoud, for his help and his patience and his work in working with the sponsors. I know it wasn't easy, but I thank him as well for his work in this. And I firmly and graciously ask for our full support of this bill. Thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share a brief story. My first experience with this was in middle school, and I was a 9th grader. And there was a little 7th grade young man who was very, very quiet, but would talk to you one-on-one. And it was at a time when families were starting to be structured differently, and his mother was working 2 jobs, so she only had a couple hours at night to be able to spend with him when he got home from school. And unfortunately, one day, he went home for lunch and he didn't come back. And I always thought, gosh, what was so horrible in that small young man's life that he didn't want to be here anymore? So what I would say is, whenever we see someone that is struggling, find the resources to help them get to where they need to be. When you're 10 years old, clear up to 24 years old, most young people operate on emotion, not on reasoning and cognitive thinking about what might be the consequences of an action. So this is a very important bill, not only to me, and I appreciate working with the good senator from Littleton on this. As I mentioned before, probably everyone in this room knows a family or has been contacted by someone, and I've been contacted by many, many constituents, not just those in my own district, but across the state, asking that we please do something, because this is an ongoing issue. Every year, every day, there is someone else who decides to take their life. And we need to make sure that suicide doesn't have a stigma attached to it, that it's okay to go and talk to somebody, that it's okay to have these feelings, but to work through them, because suicide affects not just that one individual, as we've heard before. It affects everybody around them. So I feel honored to be able to have worked on this bill, and I'm honored that Colorado will be the first state in the nation to actually have a statute in place. So again, I would urge an aye vote on this bill.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to close up, that I want to mention about the myth that is among many of us, is that if you talk to somebody who has suicidal thoughts or behavior, that they will go ahead and do it, that it encourages them to do it. The research does not show that. The data does not show that. In fact, the data shows the opposite, that if you are seeking the services that you that you need, and that you are openly talking about your depression or your thoughts and behavior that are going on, that you are less likely because you have what they call a treatment plan or a care plan that will hopefully prevent that from occurring. The other is, I want to clarify that we're not going to be the first state in the country to have suicide prevention in statute. We are going to have the first to have zero suicide model mentioned in statute. And the reason why that piece is important is that that is one of the models that we're adopting through this bill that will help us with a national collaborative where Colorado can be chosen as one of the key states in the country to work on the issue. My two daughters are 27 and 25. Between the two of them, they know almost 50 of their family or friends, students, family members of their friends who have completed suicide. So to me, some people mentioned, is one too many? Absolutely. 50 is outrageous. So we need to do something about it. I'm so grateful to be part of this, and I am grateful to be part of the solution that we can bring forward in Colorado. Thank you for your support.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to add a little clarification because there's no one model that we are specifically adopting. We are pointing towards that model as an example of, and if that can be utilized positively, that's good. But this bill was designed for a Colorado plan to be put in place that works best and involves all of the resources that we could really fit on the page to say that are out there. Again, I urge the adoption of the bill. I believe it does head us down the right direction. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 147. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill passes. Senate Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee lay over the balance of the general order second reading of bills calendar to April 5th.
The motion before the body is to lay over the balance of the second reading general orders until April 5th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had one bill under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
April 4, 2016, Mr. President, the committee holds basic reports under consideration of the following tax bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 147 as amended passed on second reading in order and gross placed on the counter for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 150, Senate Bill 164, Senate Bill 169, Senate Bill 144, Senate Bill 113, Senate Bill 158, and House Bill 1063 laid over until April 5, 2016, retaining their place on the calendar.
Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of the report.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Senate Bill 147 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 150, Senate Bill 164, Senate Bill 169, Senate Bill 144, Senate Bill 113, Senate Bill 158, House Bill 1063 laid over until April 5th and retaining their place on the calendar. Consideration of House Amendment to Senate Resolution. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 26?
Senate Joint Resolution 26 by Senator Sheffel and Garcia and Representatives Lawrence and McCain concerning the designation of First Responder Appreciation Day.
Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this was the first responder resolution. It was amended in the House. I actually appreciate the catch of the President in adding a first responder from Colorado Springs who was added to the those who had taken heroic measures section of the resolution. I move that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Joint Resolution 26.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Joint Resolution 26. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate concurs with House amendments to Senate Joint Resolution 26. Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the readoption of Senate Joint Resolution 26.
The motion before the body is the readoption of Senate Joint Resolution 26. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 26 is readopted. Co-sponsors, Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Is there objection? Seeing none, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Consideration of Governor's Appointments Consent Calendar. Mr. Majors, would you please read the appointments?
Member of the Colorado Banking Board for a term expiring July 1st, 2019, Diane Selling Barrett of Denver, Colorado, serves as a representative of the public, reappointed.
Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate confirm the governor's appointment listed on the consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar, which includes a member of the Colorado Banking Board.
You've heard the motion. Is there further discussion on the appointment? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Diane Selling Barrett is appointed as a member of the Colorado Banking Board. Consideration of governor's appointments. Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate lay over the consideration of governor's appointment calendar to April 5th.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The consideration of governor's appointments will be laid over until April 5th. No. Announcements. Majority Leader Sheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, just a few short items, and then we will recess in order to get the bills read over from Approps. There are copies of the long bill, the entire long bill, available at the front desk if you'd like to, if you haven't gotten yours already. There's a doctor a day in the House if you are so inclined. And we are going to be here in the morning. Obviously, Appropriations is meeting this afternoon to take on the budget package. We will be here in the morning. We will do some floor work. I'm talking to leadership and the JBC committee about what we can get done on the floor before caucusing tomorrow, and then confirming the schedule to get in amendments to the long bill, etc. So in the absence of any further announcements, move the Senate recess to 1 p.m. this afternoon.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will recess until 1 p.m.